Okay, so I wanted to make a short video introducing you to ROBOPro. This is the software we'll be using to program with the Fisher Technic components. When you start the program, looks pretty simple when you first start out. I'm actually going to decrease this. When you start out, it's going to look like this, and you'll see a gray area right here. You'll see some icons on the left hand side, and then you'll see a toolbar across the top. It's pretty simple. Just starting off, I want to make a new workspace so that we can actually start placing components. So I'm going to go over the stuff in this toolbar right here. So I'm going to click New. You'll see that makes a workspace, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the video or not. You'll be able to see it on your screen if you're following along. There's little dots here along this workspace, and that's where you can click and drag these components around and these flowcharting elements around. So this is going to be our workspace. Pretty simple, just a blank white workspace. We can click and drag these icons over like that. Okay. Going across the toolbar, next we've got Open, Save. You guys should know those, they're pretty self-explanatory. We've got Delete. If I want to delete an element, I can click Delete to delete it like that. You can also just click on it and then click the Delete key on your keyboard. Start and Stop. Those are going to start and stop your programs once you've actually finished making the program. That's going to be if your Fisher Technic controller is actually tethered to the computer. Okay, that's not going to be the case if you're actually downloading your program to your Fisher Technic board. That way you can run it without being tethered. Okay, so this is only going to be during testing and stuff like that when you're using this start and stop. Download is going to download the program to your ROBOPro controller or your Fisher Technic controller. That way you can run it externally without having to have it tethered to the computer. Something to note, this environment right here, this is very important. Before you start programming any programs, before you even put the first little picture on the left hand side into a workspace, I want you guys to always check this and make sure that it doesn't have this icon right here, that it doesn't say RoboIF. RoboIF is the old controller that was used prior to us getting the RoboTX and the RoboTXT controllers. If you program with this, if you make your program with this icon selected and it's in this environment, some of the flowcharting elements and the commands over here that you bring out, like this digital branch here, I brought this digital branch and placed it in under this environment. So now even if I were to switch back to this correct controller environment, this switch is still tied to that old environment. This will ruin any program that you make, and it's nearly impossible to trace back all the icons that are brought in wrong. So if you start programming and you're in that environment, you call me over to ask for help. First thing I'm always going to check probably is to make sure that it's in that environment. If you're in the wrong environment and you switch it back over, you have to start essentially and create your program from start again. Otherwise, you're going to have to trace back every single component, replace them by hand. It's much easier just to restart at that point. Okay, so make sure that you are always in this RoboTXT or TX environment here before you start placing anything. Okay, this next icon is probably not going to work because I don't have a controller selected, but this is where you can you're actually going to connect your board. So whenever you actually first plug in your Fisher Technic controller, you'll come here to connect it. So you'll have it either under USB, okay, and then you're going to select on the side what controller you're using. In the classroom, we have RoboTXT controllers and we have RoboTX controllers. The name of it's written on both controllers. Just make sure that you have whatever the correct one that we're using you have selected. Okay, so I'm going to stay with the RoboTXT for now. If you want to simulate your programs and you're just doing things at home without actually having the controller here, you need to switch this over to simulation. That way you can actually use the test window to simulate any instructions you're sending. So I'm going to leave it on simulate for right now so it doesn't cause any problems later. And then we have the test window. This is a very important window. This is so that you can test all of the inputs, test all of the outputs that you have connected to your ROBOPro Fisher Technic controller. So if I were to have a controller connected to my system right now, and I were to have a switch wired up to I1, if I triggered that switch, you would see this I1 would check like that, and it would show a 1. Okay. If I were to have an output connected to my ROBOPro Fisher Technic controller, I could turn this on clockwise, set my speed all the way to 8, and my motor that I had connected to that output 1 would turn on and spin clockwise at the 8 speed. If I have an analog input connected to this, and it's connected to input 1, say I have a photocell, this would go from 0 to up to around 2000. It could go, you know, even farther than that, because analog is that range of values. Okay, so this is where this window is going to come in very important for testing your equipment, testing your inputs, testing your outputs, etc. It's also going to come in handy when you're trying to program like ranges of analog values. Like if I want to use a branch that only triggers an output if my analog sensor is above 2000. This is where you can get your baseline values for those analog sensors, but we'll get into more on that in a later video. Continue, pause, and skip. Just when you're going through a debugging pros, you can skip through individual lines here. And then zoom in and out, zoom out are pretty self-explanatory. That just zooms in and zooms out on your workspace. Okay, so when you guys first start on ROBOPro, you'll see this window over here that has your icons. This is under level 1. This is some of the basic coding things here. So you can just drag your start out. You can drag a motor out. I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. Drag a motor out. I'm going to drag a delay out. Drag another motor out. Drag another delay out. And then I'm going to drag a program end out. Now I've connected these all together. Notice that when I was connecting them, you literally just click and drag, and then you can take these little nodes that each of these have and connect these to other things. Okay, so I've made a basic program here. Okay, I want to make a program that's going to start, turn a motor on, turn a motor off, and then a 1 second delay between all those. So it'll start, 1 second delay, turn a motor off, 1 second delay, and then it's going to end the program. However, you can look on each of these little icons. You'll see this motor 1 has got a motor, and it's turning, this got a green going clockwise. That is a command to turn that motor on and to make it go clockwise. That's fine and great for that one, but when I get down here, I want this to be a motor stop. Okay, so something about all Fisher Technic elements that you would drag in, you can right click on them and it'll come up with different options for those. So for motor output, I can choose what motor I want to control with this element. So if, say I wanted to turn motor 2 on instead, I could just select that, and once I hit OK, this would change to motor 2. I'm going to leave it as motor 1 for right now. You can select what you are actually controlling, whether it be a lamp, a motor, a solenoid valve, electromagnet, buzzer, whatever have you. And then you can select whatever the action is, if you want it to run counterclockwise, if you want it to stop, or if you want it to just go clockwise. Okay. Since I want this one to be a motor stop command, I'm going to click stop and click OK. So now you'll see that's changed to a stop sign. So now if I were to start my program, motor 1's going to turn clockwise for 1 second. It's going to stop. It's going to take a 1 second delay after that, and then it's going to end the program. Okay. Something about altering connections. Okay. So if I want to delete this and have it loop back around, I can just delete that icon. I can delete this arrow, and then I can click and drag off this, and I can make this loop all the way back up to there. Okay, so now this will actually continuously loop over and over and over again. It'll start clockwise, 1 second delay, stop, 1 second delay, clockwise, 1 second delay, and just keep going over and over and over. Okay, now let's test this in our interface window. So if I start, so if you go over here to outputs, you'll notice with 1 second delays, my motor 1, is going from stop to clockwise repeatedly. It's looping back around. You can see every time it highlights one of these, it gets stuck there and it'll flip back around and either stop or go clockwise. Okay. So that's it for that one. I do want to go over one more important part. These are just the basic elements, like I said. Okay. There are way more advanced elements that you guys are going to be using eventually, and the way that you get to those is by going up here to the taskbar and going to level. And then you've got level 1, level 2, level 3, 4, 5. Once you get done with level 1 stuff, I usually always just say go straight to level 5. And then you can expand these here, and you'll see different elements that you can use. I mean, there's your basic elements that you had from level 1. There's your subprogram elements, variables, and you'll learn what all these are in later videos as we go. Okay, So that's how you open your levels up and do more advanced things. I believe that's about it for this video. I hope it was able to help you some. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.